Eliezer Blatt is a public speaking expert who spent the last 25 years training the who's who on the Jewish speaking circuit today. Eliezer also coaches emerging Jewish clergy, educators, and leaders in his role as adjunct professor at Yeshiva University. And Eliezer has also been the public speaking trainer for over 300 couples over the last 20 years at the Jerusalem Kollel. He flies around the globe, working in person and virtually coaching CEOs, business owners, speakers, top organizations, and high achievers. Eliezer Blatt builds people into speakers and speakers into leaders. But what most people don't know about Eliezer Blatt is that his background is just as fascinating as any of the stories that he helps his students tell. When he was just 18 years old, Eliezer was the drummer of a rock band that got signed by a major music label. Then he worked behind the scenes at MTV, The Cosby Show, and PBS's Reading Rainbow. And somehow he ended up studying at Esha Torah in Yerushalayim and served as Rabbi Noach Weinberg's personal assistant. Join me today as we discuss TV, Torah, and talking with the man that Mishpacha magazine called the Dale Carnegie of the Jewish world, Eliezer Blatt.
How are you?
Look at this. Daniel Steinberg, what do you know?
It's a legendary Eliezer Blatt.
Let me turn you up a little.
Let's talk a little bit about you. You've been called by Mishpacha the Dale Carnegie of the Jewish world.
Yeah.
And you spent the last 20 years training the who's who on the Jewish speaking circuit today. So tell me some of your accomplishments, some of your big success stories. Some of the people who are
Some of you know what? I'll tell you the truth. My biggest success stories aren't the biggest successes that people think they are. You know, people look at Charlie Harary and Yoel Gold and Lori Palatnik, you know, Yom Tov Glazer. They're like when they came to me, they were, you know, and I started them from scratch. They were already good. My job for them was working with them and bringing them up from, you know, great to awesome. But the day-to-day people I'm working with CEOs, I'm working with businesses, I'm working with high achievers, people want to get out there who normally wouldn't do a breakout session or are invited to places. A lot of women now are starting their own businesses. They're doing very well, but they don't have much public speaking experience. So they'll come to me and, you know, how do I put together a speech? And then all the presentation skills, standing, moving, dress and appearance, vocal variety, you know, whatever it might be will work organically with that person. Those, to me, people who are doing that, people start doing their own webinars and podcasts and videos. Those are the successes for me.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's take a step back and tell me how you got into the business.
Yeah, so my background was I was being groomed to make television shows. Well, actually, before that, while I was in high school, I played in a band, and we won the Battle of the Bands, and we got recording time in a major studio, 2 hours recording, and a producer heard us, and he wanted us to be the opening act for a major group. They insured my hands. They said no more sports. They were investing too much. We made a record. You know what a record is? You know, it's like a CD on steroids.
What kind of music was it?
It was how much are you into music? I don't know how to describe this.
I'm not into music now, but that era I'm still familiar with. So,
Okay, so yeah, and how old are you now? You're 50.
just turned 50.
You just turned 50. I remember seeing something. You had a birthday, 50.
Yeah.
So I can talk to you. A lot of the youngsters, you know, when I tell them about records and, you know, the Cosby Show, you know, the things that I worked on, Reading Rainbow, they're like, huh? Oh, I think my grandmother watched that. And I'm like, oh no. So I was, so we were going to make it. We were going to go on tour with, you'd appreciate this. A lot of people don't. We were going to open up for Hall & Oates.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what they wanted was they wanted a mellow group in the 80s. In the 80s, when I was playing, you know, my
That's
rock and roll drums.
The 1980s for anybody listening.
1880s, yeah. In the 1980s, most of the young bands were playing heavy metal. So a group that was playing more softer rock, younger guys, was harder to find because people weren't into it so much. But we were playing a lot of covers from Bread, Chicago, Eagles. So the producer thought that we would be a good warm-up group. He liked our sound, and we had a great singer, a songwriter. And so they wanted to make the singer of my band the Elvis of the 80s. And if you're going to be a new group that's going to come up, so you're an opening, you start, if you're an opening group, you have a very good chance to make it. We were going to be the first group on VH1's section, which was mellow rock. So we did a video, ready to go. But the singer of my band had a nervous breakdown. We were just his band. He was the singer-songwriter star. So that was it. So then I had to go to college. Why? Because they said when you don't know what you want to do with your life, you got to go to college.
Yeah.
So off I went. I went into college and I saw they had an extra television department. So I skipped my beginning years. I was a singer, dancer, actor in my grade school. I loved to be up there. That with my drumming. So I was always performing before that. So I figured television was a little of all of that. Got my degree, was ready to go off to LA where the shows are made. But Hashem had something different in mind. And he put the number one situation comedy, The Cosby Show, right in Brooklyn Studios. I walked in. I said, I'm just out of college. Try me out. After a week, they hired me as a writer's assistant. Great opening level position, from your Saturday Night Live and your radio thing. So that was a great opening.
You wanted to be in front of the camera or behind the camera?
I wanted to be at this point behind the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting question because I was always right, but I wanted to be behind the camera. I didn't specifically make that choice. It was just that was what was coming up. I wasn't.
Whatever you could take.
I wasn't looking to be an actor or something like that. So I thought being, making the shows, and it just so happened, after having a degree in television, making television shows, I loved it. So I figured, let me get into that.
So the Cosby Show was filmed in Brooklyn, and you were a writer's assistant to, I guess they had a team of writers, and you would run.
Yeah, they had a team of writers that. They weren't in Brooklyn so much. We would do stuff in Manhattan. I'd go to their apartments. They would be writing the show. We'd have Bill on the line. He'd be in Atlantic City doing his shows, and they would have conference calls, and I'd be in the room. I got a funny story on the writing of the show. They were writing one of the shows. It was the first season, hot.
Wow.
Best writers, best directors. Everybody for me, it was great just starting out because I had the best of the best on the crew. NBC was investing a lot because they had 20 million people watching. So it was worth it for them. So we were in and we were writing, and there was a certain point in when they were writing the script that they got a little stuck. And so they turned around to me. I was over there. I was the assistant. I was over there, working with them, getting them coffee, lunch, whatever they needed for the top people in the world in their business. And they turned around and they said, Larry, my English name, Larry, what do you think? You got a line for this? You got an idea? So I gave them an idea, and they liked it, and they put the line in the show. And since I was assistant, I was able to work with all the different people. It was a very unionized business, so you couldn't get near anybody unless. But since I was the writer's assistant, I was able to go be like with the stage manager and the director in the studio during the shooting. And after they did the line, they had live studio audience, and the line went off. The director turned around, Jay Sanders. This is a very special part of life. And he said to me, "Hey, Larry, or Blatt, maybe, what do you think? 20 million people are laughing at your joke." So that was, I think you could appreciate what that must have been.
Yeah, it's such
that was it. So. But it was the beginning of my career. I was getting my feet wet, learning a lot. Once I had that on my resume, I started working for Coca-Cola commercials and different shows. And then I landed a great job with a show called Reading Rainbow. You ever hear of Reading Rainbow? I don't know how much television you were watching.
Yeah. We used to watch like 3-2-1 Contact and all those types of shows.
Okay. Yeah. So Reading Rainbow, was like what Sesame Street was to kindergarten, teaching them to read. First graders now to go out and read books. So it was a #1 PBS series, and it was a great show, great experience, great crew. It was a #1 children's show. When PBS gets together, they take all their money and they decide on what they're going to fund. And Reading Rainbow was always the #1 show. All these stations decided above McNair, Lair, News Hour, all the shows that people know from PBS.
Yeah,
this was so I was on that. Working with everyone. Yeah. Question.
Were you interested in the creative aspect of the show, or were you mostly technical? Were you?
I was the position. I mean, we were all doing it. It was all very creative, and it was a mix. I mean, there was writers for the show, producers for the show, and then we had this close knit crew that we worked. It was pretty much the same tech people and the same crew. It was a small crew. I think it was like 8 or 9 women, producers and writers, and me,
Mhm.
and the boss. The boss was a male, so we were like the men of the because that was just, I think, just the business of children's television
They were
was a
probably
lot of
between,
was women educators. Just so that's just what it was. So
yeah,
I came in on the TV end on that side,
yeah,
but I was working a lot with the editors, and there was music, and there was animation, and there was interviews. So I got, the creative part was really was mixed in, what I loved about that show. And
hmm,
then at a certain point, my boss said to me, I'm paying an editor, a lot of money to edit my shows. Why don't we train you? You're in-house. You're with us to be an editor, and you'll edit the shows. So great. So he sent me to editing school. I think it was like a $5,000 course for a CMX 5000 system. There was the top of the line. In those days, editing was big. Today, my 14-year-old probably can do on our computer what we used to do on the most sophisticated equipment.
yeah,
But I learned that, and now I was going to have to go into post-production. It's going to take about 2 years to learn how to use the equipment and get experience with it, and then be the editor for my company. So while I was doing that, a side story started happening. I started learning at Aish Torah once a week. Yeah, learning about my Jewish heritage. Loved it, and they suggested I go to Israel for 3 weeks to do do some classes over there. So great. I went off to Israel, and I fell in love with it, and I stayed for the next 25 years.
How did you end up uh, going to Aish in the middle of this world? How did that open up for you?
Good, good. While I was in the television business, I had a friend who, like, somehow he was introducing me to things, and he told me that Aish Torah had classes once a week in Manhattan. It was for young professionals, and I went in there, and it was guys and gals sitting there learning Torah from the best. Aish Torah had some of the best teachers in New York. You know, and I just was really turned on by what I was hearing and learning, and loved it while I was working.
Yeah,
And so I wanted to take, while I was doing this job to become an editor, I wanted to take 3 weeks off. And I made it, my way out to over there, and my boss was expecting me to come back, and that was it. I just realized after 3 weeks I had to stay and check it out. And that
and what's your background? Did you grow up traditional?
I grew up, we had it was a conservative shul. I went to Hebrew school, but I don't know about your early education, but it was more like, playing handball, and there wasn't much. I thought Hebrew to me was like a male tea bag. That was Hebrew. I didn't know so much. So the classes and going to Aish was perfect for me. Aish, was started, or no, guys who had limited backgrounds, who didn't have a clue, who came, and he was getting guys from all over the world. These were guys from Ivy League schools, professionals. He was really looking, I mean, for these guys. And it was a little bit more, I would say, from my experience, a little more creative type of guys, as opposed to like Or Sameach, as you know, was getting, a lot of the learners. But as long as, you sat and learned, and you went and became a religious plumber, they were okay with that. Where
Yeah.
Aish Torah was looking for leaders, and for a little different direction. So for me, that was great. That's what I needed. It was hard for me to sit down and learn, 8 hours a day. It wasn't like the accountants and the doctors. They loved it because they were used to learning anyway for long periods of time. So now they had truth and Torah in front of them. But for us guys like Yom Tov Glazer and and me, creative types, it was hard. But Aish Torah helped us to utilize our talents, to go out and use them that way for the Jewish people. So that was the twist.
Hmm. So you picked up and you went to Israel for 3 weeks, and then you had an epiphany over there that this is where you need to be.
Yeah, I knew I wanted to stay there. And then after about a year and a half, I got married. And so then I wanted to I was learning most of the time and doing some work. They asked me to be Rav Noah Weinberg Zitzal's personal assistant. It's a great
Wow.
job being with a great wise man all day. So now I was doing that. And then we had a corporate public speaking guy who came to the yeshiva. And he said, "You guys are learning a lot of Torah, but you need help with your presentation skills." So I was like, great, I'll help you put together a class. What was my job? Taking the world's best talent and putting it on the stage, putting it on the screen. So working with some rabbinical students wasn't such a big stretch. So I started working with him for a year. Rav Noach was away a lot, fundraising for months at a time sometimes. I said, let me go with you. Let me make your appointments, drive you. He didn't want me tailing him. So I had some downtime over there in the yeshiva. So I was working with this fellow. After a year, he was moving on, and the yeshiva paid him to teach me everything he knows on the subject, which he did. And then I started reading the books. I started going to seminars. I started to interview all the Torah personalities, the English speakers that were coming through. Every week, Rav Noach would have whoever was who's who in the English speaking, Rav Talba, Rav Brevda, the Novominsker Rebbe, Pesach Kron, you name it. Whoever was coming through, Beryl Wine, they would speak to us. And I would ask him after, I'd say what I'm doing with the public speaking, and these were the people doing it in the Torah world, and they would give me tips and points, and I used that, started teaching it. They liked it. And then they started sending me to some of the Asia Torah centers. I'd go over there and work with them. And while I was there, the local Kollel found out, the local hospital that had Jewish surgeons that were speaking. There wasn't so many frum guys that were doing that at the time. And then before I knew it, I was flying around the world doing public speaking training. Rav Noach used to have a joke with me when I walked into his office. He said, Hashem is saying, what do we do with this guy? Rock and roll drums, television production. Watch this. My whole background was just setting me up so that I would be able to do what I do. So it's pretty incredible adventure.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's amazing. So, did you feel any sense of disconnectedness from your previous world? I mean, you basically left it. It sounds like in kind of like over the span of 3 weeks, everything that you'd been working up to, you just kind of took a detour and went in a different direction. How did it work professionally? How did it work like emotionally for you?
Good question. I think emotionally, I was, after even staying at H for a while, the plan for most of the people at Aish Torah was after you finish a certain amount of time, you go back either to your respected country, where you lived, or somewhere else to work with people. So that's on the back of my mind, even though I was married after a year and a half, was that we weren't going to be staying. So I wasn't really, thinking. I was really thinking I was going to go back and mix and still have, somehow use my career. I had people, waiting for me, and I had skills and talents there. And now I had this. So I was going to somehow mix and match that. I wasn't thinking that this was going to be something that was going to become my full-time work, and we were going to stay living in Israel. I didn't think that, but that's I used to wake up every morning. I'd wake up and tell my wife, maybe I should get a job. Like she said, you have one.
Wow,
that's what
amazing.
turned out.
Amazing story.
But but I used to think about it. I remember when Reading Rainbow went public. I didn't really know what the business part was, but they was so good at what they did. They got to a point where other people started funding you to do other things, and I was already out by that time. And I remember my friends writing to me, "Oh man, you blew it!" Like that was like a big thing when someone buys out, you become public, and you get I don't know how the stocks work. I don't know how the whole thing works out, but everybody was probably very happy at the time. So I was thinking, did I miss out on something? But you know what? What I'm thinking back now, that when I'm able to work with the people I'm able to work with and live in Israel and do this kind of work and fly around the world, it's it became great. You always think, what if? What if people always say, what if you did this? Where would you be now? I see, oh, my friends are retired. They were teachers and police officers. So now they're living on their pension. They're finished, and I'm like, I can't stop. I don't got a pension.
Yeah. Well, you're also investing. The way I look at it is you're investing in all the people that are going out and spreading Torah. So
yeah, it's very rewarding that way. That I have thousands of people all over the world. When I meet them, and when someone says, Eliezer, every time I get up there, whether it's in their business, whether they, and they say, I think about the things that we work with. I had a fellow yesterday. I was on a Zoom call with him. We were reconnecting, and he took my class about 15 years ago. And he said to me, he says, you think you teach a public speaking class. He says, But I don't know if you realize what you did to people like us to show us that we go out of our comfort zone, that we can do anything in our lives. I was like, 15 years ago, and he's telling me that.
I was very struck by, you have a great tagline, turning speakers into leaders, which I think is an
Building
amazing.
speakers, building people into speakers and speakers into leaders.
Yeah, yeah. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Um, Building people into speakers, people starting from scratch, people when they just think about public speaking, they want to throw up. They just like the whole idea. When I get up there, they say my tongue cleaves to the top of my mouth, my knees start shaking and buckling. That triage. From the beginning. And these are people. Let's say a CEO who's running a multi-million-dollar company, and he has other people doing all this talking. He can't because he can't get up there. And to be able to ask for help, coaching, something like that, it's hard for them at the level they're at. But when someone says to them, "Hey, we got this fellow. He's really great, easy to work with. He's worked with such and such." They say, "Oh, I'll give it a try." Yeah. So to be able to get into that was great. So that's building people into speakers. Getting them, and then there's people once they're speakers. Now the next step is, it's one thing to learn how to speak. It's another thing to take a leadership role, whatever that might be. A leadership role might be a leadership role at the Shabbos table. That a fellow sits there, he says, no one wants to listen to me. They're all talking over, and I don't get a chance to get, even to show them a couple of tips and ideas on how to get their attention and give them a pleasant experience at the Shabbos table. That to me, that's already a leader. And then, again, anything else, you see what, Charlie Harari and Yom Tov Glazer and Lori Palatnik, they became speakers, but it wasn't more than that. They're running organizations. They're at the next step using their communication skills. So those are the how that
Yeah.
bridged together.
I'm going to ask you a question that you're probably the only person in the world who can answer this. So I have seen both Bill Cosby do comedy, and also Shlomo Brevda, blessed memory. Both of them spoke over 2.5 hours at each time I saw them. Do you think that that's possible today? Can someone hold someone's attention like that anymore? I mean, we're going back 20 years ago at the very least.
I haven't heard this question, and it's such a great question, but like people don't ask me or like talk about it. I'm so glad the two people that you mentioned, first of all, we're dating ourselves over
Yeah,
this. But I think there's a deeper point here that you're in your question. That's great. These are speakers that the reason why they're able, and we don't, first of all, yeah, you're right. We don't see it so much because I think the audience's attention span just can't handle it. We'll just, but and it was easier over there. But it's also in their credit, they were doing certain things in their talks that were keeping our attention. They had their credibility, who they were up there. We trusted them. They became vulnerable. All the things that we talk about. I'm listening, to your podcast and stuff like that, and you see what everyone's talking about when it comes to public speaking and being vulnerable. They had all those elements, all the things that we're talking. They didn't have to have be Superman in certain areas. We have the certain speakers that are just, that just wow you. They didn't have that, but they had an approachability that people, and you mentioned, I mean, two different, Lahabdil,
yeah,
Rob Brevda. But I know that example of Rob Brevda. When he used to come and speak, and he was one of the speakers. Usually we say the shorter the talk, the better. And I would ask people, but aren't there speakers that you like that you can watch forever? And usually it's like, huh? But I remember watch someone like Rob Brevda who could just speak, and the stories he would tell and the Torah that would come out, and he'd just be all over the place. I mean, you wouldn't expect a Gadol Ador, a great Torah sage, to start talking about how he was the ping pong champion in camp. You don't you match him, but when you do that, it was just mesmerizing. And you mentioned Rob Brevda. I have to tell this. So most people haven't heard this, but he would speak in English at Aish Torah and give his talk, and then he would go to Neve Yaakov in Israel, where I used to live, and he'd give the same talk in Hebrew. Now my Hebrew wasn't so good, but since I knew the talk and I saw where they were laughing, I knew exactly what was happening. And then he would go and give the same talk in Yiddish. 3 talks, different languages, and I would join them even if I didn't even understand the language so much, because he became so approachable, so
Yeah.
likable that way. And I think that's the trick. But there was also things of these people that you mentioned that they would use in it. They would use contrast in their talk. They talk about some current events. Oh, I'm that's interesting. They tell a story. Oh, that's an interesting story. They tell a joke. Oh, we all love to laugh. Yeah. Then they would say something about human nature and psychology. So they were mixing it. So you didn't even know it was hitting you, but it wasn't this. They kept changing it up in the content. I'm not even talking about the presentation skills,
Yeah.
vocal variety, and what else they were doing, as you would know as an entertainer, as a comedian, the actual presentation part. But from the content, even the content part was just had some very interesting contrast that just kept your attention for so long.
Yeah. And you don't think of them as particularly, I would say, maybe dynamic speakers. They weren't, there wasn't a lot of fireworks and pyrotechnics surrounding their speech. Where Brevda
Exactly.
spoke for hours in, kind of a hushed tone almost. And Cosby used to sit in an armchair on the stage, but they could just go in hours and hours and hours, and they held the audience's attention. Yeah, amazing. So tell me about some of the primary things that you cover in your speech training workshops and things like that. What are the things that you cover? You mentioned some of the things already, but walk me through it.
So one of the things that I do is I give them things that every speaker needs. There's certain things that I find every speaker needs, even if someone's experienced. Many times they'll just get a certain amount of those areas, but they want more of it. I'll give you an example. Someone like Charlie Harari or Yo Gold, experienced speakers already would come in. They're already speaking. They already have certain skills. They know they should move, but how to move, when to move, eye contact. Everyone says, yeah, you have to have eye contact. Well, how long should you speak to a small group? You have a table of in an executive meeting, and you have 8 people. How long should you spend on eye contact in each person? Well, I don't know. And how do you do, what about a big group? How do the technical now, how do you do this? I know I should move, but when and how? I know I should use my hands, but what should the little things. Now, a lot of people think, well, what's the big deal? You get up there and, you just do it. But when you're doing it right, you're doing it in a certain way that keeps people's attention, and the hand gestures are working well, and the eye contact's working well, and you become credible in their eyes. And then when you have that, then the message can go in, the medicine can go down. Yeah. So even though at the end of the day, your content's the most important part, and I think that's another thing that I make sure my students know, because a lot of times they hear it's not what you say, how you say it. Yeah. So that's not, I mean, from a Torah perspective or whatever, at the end of the day, your message is the most important thing. However, if you don't wrap it with the presentation skills and it doesn't get in, what good is it? So that's right. So I give them the skills that every speaker should need, and then it's very organic. Everybody has something different that they need. It's not one size fits all. This one needs this. This one needs this. I'll be working with groups, and they're all coming with all different dynamics. One guy's outgoing, and he's has all this energy. I work with him. Then you have the other fellow. He's like, he said, that's not me. I'm not Mr. Funny. I'm not Mr. Dynamic. This is me. So work with him. Get him to a point where he would be watchable, listenable.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things.
How do you approach structure of a presentation? What's your philosophy about that?
Okay, so after I give them, that's the presentation skills parts. I have how to do the structure, and then what happened was, as I started teaching, people said, "Could you tell us about how to write down our content?" I call it the creative content development. So we'd have other people do. Other rabbis came in who were experienced this and that. So they said, "No, we want you to do it." So I started putting together things, and one of the strengths I had was to be able to laser focus my teaching and stuff. Like take something that might take someone a whole class to do and just laser focus it into this is what you need to do. So I did that with the content development. How do you put down a talk? What is a good talk? What's the structure like on the talk? How do I use humor in the talk? How do I use contrast in the talk? So I started putting together that. So I had the presentation skills, and now I started weaving into my classes, as opposed to just doing classes on content development, that they would be more boring. You sit there and write notes, theory. So I would mix it. We do the presentation skills and say, okay, now we're going to learn how do the professionals practice? People say, why? What do you mean? How do they practice? I went over the talk twice in my head on the plane ride over. No, that's not a professional. No, I'm best when I wing it. I get take a couple of shots, yeah, a couple of chaims, and I'm ready to go. I'm like, well, you might be ready to go, for a l'chaim, but you're not. That's not how a professional speaker could go. You're not going to last too long, huh? So I would do the content development also. So I have a system of how do you put down what questions to ask yourself before you even take your pen to paper. How do you put down your talk? How do you practice your talk? What are certain frameworks within the talk that I can use? And these are all things I got from different coaches and different areas and reading. I put it like all together to laser focus it so that my students will be able to get the best of what they need.
I would imagine that your background in television and editing all feeds into that, because a talk is essentially it's a TV show. It's a show, and a show has a beginning, a show has a middle, has an end. It has to be followable. You can't take people off in different directions. So I would imagine that from an editor's perspective, you're very, very well equipped to do that.
Yeah, like you asked before, like when I was being groomed to make television shows and be a situation comedy director, that was what I was looking at. And then getting onto the editing, the post-production side, I figured those two things together would make me very marketable. Because when I was in an editing room and I was able to know when the directors came in and they were working on the show, I knew more than I wasn't just a button pusher. They're very good. A lot of the editors, they were very technical. They knew how to use the equipment, but I had these other skills that I was able to communicate with the people. And I think my boss that I left, when I went to Yeshiva, was like really hoping I came back, because that would have been something that he really wanted in that room, because people are spending a lot of time and money with an editor. If you can have an editor that was also had a great personality with people, I'm not saying that they don't, but it just, a good editor, he knows what he's doing, but just tell me what you need.
Yeah.
Let me do it. You like it.
Someone told me there was a gal who used to work in television, and she was a producer. And she said, when I got editing skills, I became, superwoman. And she said, a producer editor, they call them predators, because
I love it.
Yeah, because they're just so powerful. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about storytelling, because I know that's something that you focus on, and it's a big part of public speaking, keeping people engaged. What's your approach? What's your philosophy regarding storytelling?
Yeah, storytelling's great. People need stories. It's not what's that saying go? The saying goes, it's not they don't want to know, they don't care what you know, they want to know that you care. Something like that. And stories do that. Stories really get into people's kishkes, gets into their inside. So I'm a big believer in using storytelling in the talks and getting those in, because that's what people are going to remember. Many times after you see someone and they say, "Oh, hey Eliezer, I saw you speak, 10 years ago at this dinner." Oh yeah, do you remember what I said? No, but I remember the story, or I remember the joke. Yeah, that one gets in. So you have those, you put the stories in, that's what's going to engage one. You don't just have to be, some people, they just have their business is just telling stories for 45 minutes. That's their thing, but if you mix and match it, and you use stories, and personal stories are the best. Why? Because you can remember them the easiest, because they happen to you. Yeah. And you should be the person who tells your story the best. I'm always, telling people that people say, "No, Eliezer, the truth is you tell my story better than me," but it shouldn't be that way, because when the story is yours, you're bringing a lot of different things to it that no one else can bring to it. I help them with the presentation skills to help them bring it out also. But a story that happened to you, that feeling is going to come from you, and the audience identifies with that. Also, a personal story is good, because it's not like I got this story from Chicken Soup for the Soul. I got this story from I went to Wikipedia. I don't know if they have stories, but I went online, for that. There's one thing about getting a story, and sometimes there are great stories. I mean, Yoel Gold is getting, he has some personal stories, but mostly he has great stories and brings them in. So any story that you can use, but there's nothing like a personal story. So I'm always working with. I have a whole system on how to pull personal stories, because people say, Eliezer, you got all these personal stories. I got none. I know that they have. So I have a class that we work on just for pulling personal, how they can pull their own personal stories. I got that from one of my coaches, and that works great for storytelling.
Maybe you can help me with this, because I struggle with, and I know other people struggle with it, where let's say you have a story, but you tell the story, and then at a certain point you get lost, and you're like, and it just kind of fizzles out, and someone's like, well, I guess you had to be there. It just goes nowhere. So how do you have a story that lands, that actually makes an impact? Whereas, sometimes it's just like a funny little anecdote, and then it just doesn't really go anywhere, and it just kind of fizzles out.
Yeah, so you have to work the story and be able to say it out to see what are the ingredients of it, where are you getting to with the story. If it's something short, then maybe it shouldn't be a full story. Maybe it is just a little anecdote that you'll put in. But you want to be able to craft a story that you bring them in, and that they feel part of it, that they're in there with you, and you bring that in. So I think the art of storytelling, and then if the best thing is to be able to have your story not just for the story's sake, but be able to teach and bring your message at the end. I'll get phone calls on the Eliezer, I'm speaking tonight. Do you have a joke for me? I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Yeah, fine. People just think, as long as they tell a joke or they tell a story, even though it has nothing to do with what they're saying, yeah, uh, it's not ideal. It's best to be able to connect them and have that. That's why my clients, they start to write a journal they have certain stories that they put down, personal stories, so they could see, I'm talking about this. Oh, I got this story. I got this story. Yeah. Or you got, I don't know, as a comedian, if you have jokes, you have, animal jokes. I got my favorite jokes, or people who know me know I have my favorite my chicken joke. And sometimes I'll be at a chasna, I'll be somewhere, and I'll find someone who's ripe to hear my chicken joke, and there'll be someone who heard it already, one of my friends who heard it many times, and I'll say, "Oh, you heard this already." He says, "I want to hear it again." Now, what is that? So it's also in how you tell the joke, how you embody it. In addition,
How do you know something's worth retelling a personal story? What kind of impact must it make in order to justify you telling it?
it depends on the story. Is the story an entertainment story, something like that? You're going to teach a lesson. Is it to move somebody? Today, moving on the posts that are coming out and the people putting out these stories. It's just, so you know what? I used to I like to post content and post things to teach them about public speaking, communications, life, business, whatever I can add. But sometimes I'm getting these stories where I'm just reposting, and it just says no words I'll write on it, or my heart goes, it's showing hostages coming back and being reunited with their families, brothers who coming back after they have their family hasn't seen them for 3 months now, and it's just so heartwarming seeing these little stories. It's so much more powerful than anything I'm going to write on my post. So I'll just put it in. I'm always thinking, am I like chickening out on the post by giving them this? I guess it also depends on your market. I'm sure there's people who it says, Eliezer, where's the public speaking stuff? Like you keep sending things about your because they don't happen to live in Israel and are dealing with what the Jewish people and the world is are dealing with this. But stories. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you help people with stage fright? Is that something that you deal with?
Yep, you can't be a public speaking teacher and not deal with stage fright. Yeah, it's not someone. It's not like I'm going to do a class and someone says, "Well, could you help me with my fear of public speaking?" What's that? Yeah, that's a big one. They say most people are what do they say? Like 95 50% of the people are afraid to speak in public, and the rest are liars, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that it's a normal thing, and I tell everybody, it's something everybody deals with it on a certain level. Um, every once in a while, you get someone who says, "I don't have any stage fright. It's no problem for me." There's something wrong there usually. There has to be, that there's none, because it's a normal thing to have. It
Mhm.
could be what the person really wants to say is, I'm in control of that. But we don't, someone says, Eliezer, how are you going to can you get rid of the butterflies in my stomach? I say, I'm not going to get rid of them. I'm going to show you how to have them fly in formation. That's the thing. You learn how to deal with it. There's a very small difference between excitement and fear. They're very similar things. If someone was monitoring your physiological processes, they would have a hard time to find out if you were fearing or exciting, because the breath goes the same. A lot of the same things happen when you're on a roller coaster that when you're up in front of a stage. So when they're saying that, say, oh, okay, so that's not a bad thing. Is that anxiety, that excitement when someone jumps out of the airplane with the parachute on the, is there a fear for that? No, they don't call it fear. That's excitement. So we just switch it when you come in front of a stage and you have the ability to impart something and benefit your audience somehow. You just make that switch. So, oh, okay. So if I make a mistake and they're looking at me and those fears, they start to wash away because I have something to give over. I would tell my clients sometimes, if you had $1 million check that give out to your audience, some donor came and said, I'll give you $1 million checks to give out to your audience members, but they have to be with you the whole time. They can't space out, they can't turn on their phone, they can't leave. Yeah. Do you think that your job as a speaker would change? If you knew that, if you knew they don't listen to every word and they space out, they're not getting that $1 million check, you'd do anything. If they started to go up to the bathroom, you'd block the door. Yeah, you'd figure out things to get you, so you don't think when you get up there and you're giving over, this is how at least you should feel, something to benefit them, that you're giving them even more than $1 million checks. So if you think of it like that, you think I'm nervous to give out that? Oh, I can't give out that check. Oh, I'm not the. All of a sudden, it would change people like this.
Yeah. Yeah. So you take the focus off yourself and put it on them.
And put it on the value and the benefit that you have an opportunity. Wow, I worked on this. That's as a pulpit rabbi, as a sermon. I worked on this, and I found a new way of thinking about this. I mean, I must have seen this post like 400 times, but this new angle. And now you go in and you're saying to your audience, I know you all looked at this, yeah, but did you ever think about, what's happening over here? You have Joseph, and corresponding with Yehuda. What's the difference? Joseph, he was able to withstand Potiphar's wife's advances. No human was able to do that. It was superhuman. It's hard to model that. But Yehuda, he had a problem he had to get out of, yeah, with Tamar, and he fessed up. I made a mistake. He's more human. We can identify with him more. And that's why we're called Jews from Yehuda and not Joes from Yosef.
Hmm.
So you see how you take something and you're bringing that over. You find a twist that you can benefit them, then they'll listen to you, and you can give it over. So if you can get that inside of you and think, wow, I have something unique, a twist on something that maybe they hadn't heard, they can leave different than they came in. All right, so what? I make a mistake, and I don't get the best nose. I'm not doing enough eye contact. It's okay, because they're going to get something out of that. So that's one way there's a switch in there that I try to work with people to let them know that while they're up there, it's not about them. It's what they have to benefit their audience.
Yeah. What if someone has a presentation to give and the content isn't necessarily engaging? And but it needs to be done. It's a quarterly review or something like that. How do you coach people to maintain that engagement attention when the material, the content is just not there? It's just not naturally engaging.
Mm-hmm. So one way I'll try to do that is to find personal stories. If they have something that to them seems or is coming out, certain things are more difficult to give over, or more, I would say, dry. it's interesting. You watch a TED Talk, let's say, the TED Talks that come out, even if the subject matter might be a little dry, you'll see how they present and give it over. They're bringing a story, they're bringing something to it that really makes it pop. It's very rare. I mean, you have TED Talks that are better. Some, 30 million people watch and something. But it's generally, if you're going to get to that point where you're doing a TED or a TEDx talk, it's generally like there's nothing there. But it only will get there usually when it has something already. So what do you want to add in that? One of the ingredients is, put a story in. Make it personal. Here's my big idea. Here's the point I want to get across. How can I put some of myself in this? What can I add to this that's going to make it so that it's not? And that I'll have that a lot with CEOs, with businesses, with rabbis who are teaching something. Sometimes they'll teach Jewish law, halacha, and it's not so interesting with it giving over that particular part. But we find an angle. We find something inside of it to make it exciting. Yeah, I remember at Aish Torah we had a Rav who was teaching the halakas, and he made it. We're like sitting there. It could be torturous. Some of it and dry, but you make it exciting. You make it interesting. You show how it all fits in a way. So that's where the work comes.
Yeah. I wonder if that plays into your speakers, into leaders, where you don't consider yourself just a person giving over the content, but you're actually the content is representative of who you are. They're buying into you giving over the content. You're there's a phrase I like to use called hide and speak, where sometimes people will, they'll give a Devar Torah and they're just sharing it, they're just passing it on, but they're kind of hiding behind that Devar Torah. They're not really giving you any insight into how it relates to them personally. And I think that maybe that when you connect it back to yourself, it's a little bit, it might be nervous because, now you're drawing attention to yourself, but that's the part about being a leader. You're standing behind what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So what are some of the blind spots that you find that new speakers have that they may not be aware of? What do you see most often?
We'll see if someone has nervous gestures. We'll see that. We'll watch on video. We'll get rid of those. Those are things that are blocking their effectiveness. So those are some of the first things we'll get rid of. I'll show them right away that even though they feel nervous inside, when we watch, you'll see as nervous as you felt inside, the audience doesn't see it. So a new speaker is nervous inside. He has a lot of different things that are happening. And he thinks that the audience is going to see that in him. I had a speaker once, his heart was pounding so strongly, he thought the audience was going to see it through his shirt. That's how people feel up there. So I show them, we go through, we watch everyone's video, and I said, who felt nervous? And they all raised their hand, and different degrees of nervousness. And I said, did he look nervous? Did he look nervous? And they all said, no, that might be, if there's something that shoots out that says nervousness, person's always, turning his guy. I used to think, my rabbis used to do this. I used to think I get smarter if I would turn my kippah. It didn't work, But, nervous gestures. I was like adjusting the glasses. Yeah, this. I remember once I had one of my kids once wrangled my glasses, and I didn't have them for, a day or two, whatever, and I was teaching. And so while I'm teaching, I'm going like this. I'm adjusting my glasses, and they're not there. We get into these habits that we do so I would go to their belt. I mean, you probably saw this all, different things all the time. If they're doing something that's just people like looking at it that says nervous, we'll get rid of that right away. So that's one thing that we look for. And then I go through even things that you wouldn't think speakers work on. Like I'll say, okay, one of the things that have a problem when people are nervous is because they're not breathing correctly up there. And I got all these super adults that graduated Ivy League schools, CEOs, professionals, and they're like, Eliezer, we're paying you a lot of money, and you're going to teach us how to breathe? Yes. Now, how about this one? Okay, we're all going to learn how to stand when you give a speech. Eliezer, I've been standing for 45 years doing fine without you. But have you? And then I show them, all the different stances that we see up there, and everyone gets a big laugh and is saying, here's a proper ready stance. So all these things that sound like, Eliezer, why are we spending time doing these? When the stance is right, when you're breathing correctly, when you're bringing all these things we're discussing, it all works like a symphony. And when you see a speaker and someone says, Eliezer, he looks like he's been trained by you, that's a failure for me. I'm going to say, what's the first thing you saw? Because I'm going to get rid of it. But when they see a speaker and say, Eliezer, she doesn't need your help. She's a natural. I go, yes. Because the audience has no idea how much time we spent making it look that way. You know why? Because it's unnatural to look natural. We work for hours on breathing and standing and getting everything ready to go. And you see this, man, when you see a TED Talk, you're like, wow, I knew she was the world's best neurologist, but I didn't know she was such a good presenter. She's coached. Most of the TED Talk people are coached. I know I get like a lot of the other speaker trainers. I coach this one. I coach this one. I coach this one. It's like today that's a big deal. I don't know if you don't get it so much like with the rabbi. A lot of them don't even know what a TED Talk is, but that level. So it's unnatural. You work at it. And then like anything else, an athlete, a musician, people go up to the first violinist after the concert. And the woman says, I would die to play like you. And when he says, oh, yeah? Are you ready to practice for 8 hours a day for the next 10 years? And she says, no. He says, well, I did. You think I just jumped out of bed this morning and did this? It took a lot of work. So people don't want, but when it comes to public speaking, for some reason, people just think, people have to train for this? You need a coach for this? Can't you just flap your lips and because since we all do it, we say, how hard can it be? And you want to hear something interesting? When I ask, especially the guys, do you play an instrument? Why is it that 50% of the guys say, I don't play an instrument, I play a little drums? I always wondered, why does half of the population of men play the drums? And then I figured it out. You see, when you pick up, if I ask you you say you play trumpet, it's going to be a few weeks before you can even blow in that darn thing. Figure it out. So you can't fake that. Or guitar, you got to learn chords. Yeah. But drums, people figure I pick up the sticks and I'm halfway there. What is it going to take? So I show them. The right hand goes bump, 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 bump on the cymbal. The left hand on the snare goes plop, plop. Your right foot goes da-doom, da-doom on the bass drum. And your left foot on the hi-hat goes chick, chick. And they go, oh, I don't play the drums. What just happened? I just showed them it's four-way coordination. Even a piano is two, if you don't include the pedals. Yeah. Much easier. They're much easier if they want to pick an instrument to play, to say a guitar or a trumpet, they'll get by with me much faster than. But we think just picking up, we're halfway. I think that's what happens with public speaking. I speak all the time. How hard could it be if I'm speaking to you all the time in the coffee tea room to speak on a stage in front of 1,000 people? That's where we come in.
Yeah, the best speakers in the world make it look easy. That's the best professionals in any craft.
He doesn't need training. They'll say, they'll see Apple. What's his name? Mr. Apple.
Steve Jobs. Yeah.
Steve Jobs. Yeah. So he looks naturally. Comes out dressed like a normal guy. Comes out, does his thing, and that. You know how many hours he worked on each part of it, even the parts that you think he didn't plan that. He worked on the parts so that you would say, like he'd be thinking about something, like he's thinking about it now. He worked hard on getting that, getting
Right.
it to like that. So there's a perfect example of one of the best business speakers. It looks like he was a natural. He worked many hours to work on his public speaking.
Let me ask you, I know you also train, you're an adjunct professor at Yeshiva University, and you train people in the Jerusalem Kollel. What are some of the things that you teach them prior to going out into the field? What are some of the lessons you try to impart to them? Besides technique.
Yeah, so we'll do the techniques, we'll do content development, they'll get all of that, what they need to put down their talk, how to think about their talk, how to bring it out. In YU, I have a whole semester, I have a long time to work. So we'll work on a speech to persuade, a speech to educate, a humorous speech, chesped, a eulogy. we'll work, so they'll get a chance to do this, to feel those out, and at the same time we're learning the skills to do it. So I'm in my classes, I'm taking them, taking them through in the shorter sessions, like when I have 4 2-hour sessions, and we'll do a certain amount. So depending on how much time I have them, or who wants, like a CEO wants his company to have certain skills, what do they need those skills for? What are they going to be doing? I was invited to work with a team of expert witnesses who are specialized in their field. This particular place was engineering and stuff. So they would be, if there was a court case of a car accident, yeah, they would know exactly if the car is going this far, what kind of tires they had, and the flow was like, and they would do their expert testimony, and there was a good chance that the case would be decided by their expert testimony. So the owner of the company brought me in to work with them. They're experts in their field, but they weren't necessarily good presenters and communicators. If I can now have them be able to present better their case, that could be worth millions to their clients.
Amazing. Tell me some of the, we're wrapping up, shortly, but I want to know who you admire in the speaking world. Who are some of the models, influences that have shaped the way that you speak or train?
I think you mentioned some of the people that used to come that I used to get to see at Eshatar, the Rob Brevdas, or Rob Noach Weinberg's at Sal, a master communicator. And people, when they hear of Noach, they say, "Oh, he was a natural, wasn't he?" Again, that's the ultimate natural. He knew exactly what he was doing. I know, but spending as his personal assistant, and talking to him and being with him, that when he used his hand and he used his humor and his eye contact, he thought about, when he first started, he wasn't a good public speaker. Yeah, he told me he would flopped. But he realized that if I'm going to change the world the way I want to, I need to get this skill, and he worked on it. Yeah, and it was great. So people like that. I don't have anyone like favorites. When I see a speaker, they come up there and they're telling stories and they grip the audience. Sometimes I'll have speakers. I'm supposed to watch them. They're paying me a lot of money to give them feedback, and then halfway through, I'm like, uh-oh. I was so enthralled. I was so captivated. Okay, tell me how to improve. And you know what? Many times talking to clients and stuff like that, when certain things are working, I mean, there's always something that someone needs somehow, to find that they want to work. But you know what? If something's not broken, I'm not just trying, to fudge it. I'll say, you know what? It was very good. Oh, come on, Eliezer, give it to me, No, it's working. Maybe we could work on this, that, and the other thing. But that's just the way it is. We're not. Some people just, things are working well, and you don't have to fix it.
Right. Has there ever been anybody that you haven't been able to train? You just said, I just, we can't work together. You're coming at it.
Yeah, I get. I don't. As far as, well, people ask me. Let me rephrase the question, and then we'll get back to it. Someone asked me, could everybody become a good speaker? Could everyone speak? Not everyone's going to be a great speaker. Some people, Hashem just gives them certain skills, certain talents, and it's easier for them. My thing is, everybody could become better. Give them something to become better. But not everyone. I have people that I'm working with sometimes that they're not going to be a Charlie Harari. I get people who call me up, how long is it going to take you to make me Charlie Harari? It's a ridiculous thing, to be able to do that. I'll help you to become you better. So that's not everyone is going to be a great speaker, but everyone could become better. It's not that don't get up at all. People will say everyone will have a different role in life and has different jewels inside of them, diamonds that's unique to them, their Torah, their education, their personality, who they are, that they can give something to the world. Everyone has that. You want to be able to bring that out. But not everyone, as you know, not everyone's is going to be able to do stand-up comedy. They have comedy clubs and they have club that you can come in, and what do you call the kind of club you come in, you can stand in
Open mic. Yeah.
open mic type things, and people will try it and work on their confidence and like that. But not, some people have it and some people don't. So you work with what they have. It's like that. It's like that in anything. Not everyone's going to be an Olympic athlete, but maybe a person could do a short marathon.
And last question I want to ask you is, how important do you think public speaking is a skill as we enter into the age of AI and ChatGPT and writing speeches and all that kind of stuff and machines taking over human skills? Where do you see public speaking fitting into that?
Interesting. Recently, I've been getting more and more involved. They have this app that you speak into it, and it tells you how many ums that you said. It tells you how fast you're speaking. So that a lot of the questions from the speaker trainers was, is this going to put us out of business? Or people won't need us anymore? But the truth is they're going to need the human side also, because the machine's not going to be able. There's a lot of things that we were talking about today in this interview in the kishkas to get the people that the app is just not going to do. Okay, counting ums and speed. You talk too fast, so it's to slow down, or it tells you where your eye contact is too much on one side. It's amazing what the But someone mentioned something to me. I liked it. They said, a hammer was a great invention, but it's only going to go so far. You still need the carpenter to work it. It's an incredible tool, and I think that's how I'm looking at as far as from a speaker trainer and a public speaker is concerned to use. Yeah, if you use it as a tool, it takes the right words that you need, this and that, but you got to use it with the human element, and I think then it will be productive.
So anywhere I should direct people to you?
You can see more on my LinkedIn profile of basic things. But if anyone's interested, most of my work is coming from, I've been doing this for over 25 years, so pretty much people know he's the speaking guy. If you need someone to help you, a CEO, a business person who really wants to get out there and start speaking more and get up at these events. We're having a lot more now in the Jewish community. There's a lot more events happening. You want to do a breakout session. You want to get on a panel. I'm getting a lot of now business people who want to now step up and be able to present themselves, not just in their business, but once you're successful in business and you're credible, people want you to speak on other things also.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. There's a secret the great public speakers know. Did you know there's a method for cutting straight through to an audience's heart, grabbing their attention and holding it, and making a memorable impact with your presentation? The best speakers in the world utilize it, and now you can too, every time you get up to speak. Download your free Maggid Method of Public Speaking template at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. The Maggid Method will teach you how to find your authentic voice, craft meaningful presentations, manage people's attention, and build unbreakable bonds with your audience. Go to maggidmethod.com and download your free copy now.